a moment that also goes online. Yeah, so I think it's already online. Maybe we can say our greetings to the online audience who is also watching us from their homes, and we also welcome their questions after Peter's presentation. So thank you all, not only us who are physically here, but everything goes beyond, and people who will be watching this recording later. So welcome to the European Academy on Youth Work, also virtually from where you are at the moment. For us who are here, it's really my pleasure and honor to invite Peter. I think I was trying to remember, I met Peter first time literally 25 years ago in the European Youth Center Strasbourg. And this really brings back a lot of memories, and interestingly, maybe it's a cycle of life, but I think that was a course about conflict transformation. And nowadays we would say, wow, this is still valid. Did we move more from there, or we are still in the same place? But nevertheless, Peter did many things in his life. You can see it on the app. He's really, I would say, cutting-edge thinker around world, change, leadership, and many other things that sometimes it's not easy to put into words. But it was our intention to bring Peter here live, and we are actually happy that you managed to come physically on stage, not to have you on screen, because this brings completely another energy, another contact, another possibility that the message comes across. But we wanted to invite Peter here today to open up our thinking about change. So the moment when we start thinking about future or futures in plural, it's immediately the moment when we start thinking, okay, what do we need to change? Or maybe what do we need to keep and have more, like your question has before. But also, how do we feel about change, personally, organizationally, also as a community? And sometimes we wonder, okay, what exactly the change is. And that's why we had Peter here on stage to lead our thinking. So open your mind and think together with us about what does it mean to address change, to support change, to guide change in a hyper-complex world. So big applause for Peter Mary on stage here in European Academy.
Great. Thank you, Darko, and morning, everybody. It's nice to be in the youth work context again. It's been a little while. But I did wake up this morning thinking, this is quite a kind of challenging stuff I'm offering them. I hope it wasn't like the youth work events I was at 20 years ago when it was a long night infused with various substances and a slow morning. But you seem to be very awake, so that's good news. Right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to cover 4 key elements. One, we're going to look at how do we think about change? What do we actually mean by the word change? We're going to look at what kind of moment in change are we in, collectively, globally? What are we moving from and then to, with an understanding of deeper kind of dynamics of value systems that are going on in the world? And then we're going to finish looking at what does that mean for me as a leader, trying to lead in these kind of uncertain and complex times. As I say there, we'll be able to share a PDF, right, Darko, Sonia, of the slides, so you don't have to write it all down. There's sometimes quite some information on them, and it's not only being sent live, but it's also being recorded. So if you want to go back and look at pieces, you can later on. All right. So a lot of the change stuff I'm going to share with you has come from something called spiral dynamics. Anybody familiar with spiral dynamics here? A couple, good. Anyone familiar with Ken Wilber's integral theory? Okay, that's good. Good. So this first piece then, trying to get a handle on what do we mean by change. First piece of the puzzle, trying to understand the state of change that we're in. And change happens as we interact with our life conditions. So it's all about how well do we feel we can cope with the world around us. If we feel we can cope, everything's hunky-dory, we're in here what they would call an alpha fit. I understand the world, I can engage with it well, fine, no problem. But if the world changes around us, or if I change, that's when stress enters the system, and it's actually a biological thing, because when Darwin said survival of the fittest, he didn't mean survival of the strongest. He meant survival of the one that fits best in their ecology, in their context. So when we feel a lack of fit, we get stressed. When we feel we can't cope, when we feel our collective systems can't deal with what's going on, stress enters the system. That's what they would call this beta stress. And at that point, we're either agile and adaptive and we learn, and we flex up through some evolutionary change to a new fit. Few navigated that onto the next stage. If we can't adapt, or if the life conditions around us are too complex and challenging, the stress increases and you can crash down into what they call here the gamma trap. So obviously that's related to a lot of mental health issues individually, burnout, all of those kind of things. It's our body winding us down when we can't fit or contribute, when we can't see how we can fit and contribute to our environment. And collectively, that's when you get more kind of revolutionary change as people fight against the old systems. If you get through that, then there's this great surge of energy, they call the delta surge, where there's a big relief. There's often a lot of anger at the old system at that point, and the risk is that at that point, the new system turns around and cuts off the head of the old system, which leads to all sorts of problems later on down the line. So what you're really looking to do is to build in, as we know in non-formal learning, the learning and adaptive capacity in systems that enables us to take the feedback and respond quickly. So one thing you can look at first is what's the state of change that we're in. Depending on the state of change, you're going to see different kinds of change. So we talk about change, but there are many different kinds, right? If you just need to improve the system a little bit, then, 1, 2, or 3, fine-tune it, reform it a little bit, just make some improvements here or there, that's fine. So if you've got a little bit of beta stress, a little bit of misfit, you can kind of upgrade it. As the stress increases, what you might often see is a little bit of a regression back to the past, like this down stretch and the up stretch, and an attempt to find new ways. So it's like Don Beck, who was behind a lot of the spiral dynamics, used this image, which I'll come back to later, of a balloon. So when the system is stressed, it's like you squeeze the balloon in the middle and you get a bulge at the top and a bulge at the bottom. And that's, you get regression as people go back to the past for things that are certain, but you also get an upstretch as you attempt to bring in new thinking. And if that all goes well, you might then move on to these kind of vertical changes, so where a whole new system comes online. There are different stages in that as well, and the quantum change is basically a whole systems change where everything changes. And so, you can see what's going on in the world at the moment. There's a lot of regression and downstretch, but there's also a lot of upstretch, and you can see the conditions falling into place for a kind of whole level systemic change. So you've got the state of change that we're in. You've got an understanding of the kind of change that is going on. And the kind of change that will happen will depend on the conditions that are in place for that change to happen, right? The more conditions that are in place, the bigger or the more intense the change is likely to be. So to run through these quickly, first of all, you've got to see, is there actually capacity in the person or in the system to change? If there's simply not the neurological capacity or the collective intelligence or ability to make the change, well, we can stop right there. Secondly, you need to see, have the current problems been solved? The challenges that people are facing at the moment, are they able to solve those? Because if they're not going to go on to something new, are they? They're not going to move until they've solved their current problems. So are there solutions to the existing issues? If you can tick that box, then you can go on and say, okay, so they're solving their current problems, okay, but they're also not going to change if they don't feel a dissonance, if they don't feel stress with the current system, right? So if there's no tension with the current system, why is anybody going to change? Right? So there needs to be a feeling of dissatisfaction for them to change. Okay, tick. If you tick that box, then you could have the dissatisfaction, but if you don't have any insight into the underlying causes of the problem, then you're also not going to be able to make the next level of change. So if the dissonance is there, you need to go and look into, can we actually see underlying the problems, what's going on, and are there possible alternatives out there? If that's in place, then the question is, well, why hasn't it changed? Right? If there's dissonance with the problem, we can see alternatives, we know what the problem is, then why isn't it changing? That's when you've got to go and find the barriers that are blocking that change and identify those. If all of those are in place, you're likely to get a full system change. But what people often forget to do is to put in place the consolidation for the change once it's taken place. Because if you don't support people and communities once the change has happened, then they will very quickly drop back to the old patterns. Yeah. So these are kind of 6 conditions you can be thinking about, and then you get to these kind of matrices that you can play with if you're into this kind of thing. Well, you can look at, okay, we've got the change states. What state are we in? Which kind of change are we talking about here? Which conditions are present? and then you map those by going, okay, so if we have these conditions present, then we're likely to see this kind of change, right? So it's a way of just thinking about change and thinking about different kinds of change, thinking about conditions for change. Yeah, you can come back and look at this, obviously, later in more detail, but it's just a way of, it's one map of being able to get our heads around what's actually going on and getting more specific about what we mean by change. Okay, so that's the kind of technical change bit, as it were. So what the hell is going on in the world today? That's what we're going to move on to now. You know, this slide, I think I've had in presentations for 20 years. So the hyper-complexity that we've been seeing, the increase in all of these kind of issues coming together, is creating conditions that we've never had to face before as humanity. And this word hypercomplexity came out of the IBM CEO study back in 2012, when they were, what they do, IBM every few years, they interview thousands of CEOs and they ask them, like, what's going on, what are the challenges they're facing, etc. And the one word they pulled out of that study in 2012 was hypercomplexity. So that tells them, what does that tell me? That they didn't just think things were complex, they had to invent a whole new word, hypercomplex, to basically tell the rest of the world they didn't have a clue about how to navigate what was going on in the world today. And in that report, you can read how they're finding business schools are failing to be able to provide people with the qualities they need to deal with the challenges they're facing. And those qualities were things that we'd all be very familiar with in youth work, which is like communication, collaboration, creativity, the kind of, inverted commas, soft skills that then became called 21st century skills, that are the ones that actually you need if you're going to be able to navigate these kind of challenges. So we've got all these issues coming together. Only one of them can make the front page of the newspaper any one time, and yet they're all there and they're interlocking. So they're feeding off each other, they're amplifying each other, and they're giving us a level of complexity that we've not had before. The technology is accelerating it. Globalization, of course, is accelerating. We've got climate feedback. We've got all these conflicts going on now. So all of this stuff, you know, can get pretty overwhelming, right? Sometimes. Okay, so that's requiring kind of collaboration levels that, again, we've not faced before. And in terms of the question earlier, that's one of the things that we really have to offer the world, is the ability to collaborate across cultures to deal with challenges that we're facing. So this is Ervin Laszlo, who's a systems thinker. And if you come back to the kind of kinds of change that we're talking about, we're really talking about something going on at the moment that we would call non-linear emergence. So linear change is just gradual, step by step, step by step. Emergence is when it's like that's why I've got the image of the caterpillar and the butterfly. It's like when something radically new pops up and emerges that we couldn't see from where we were before. That's the nature of emergence. And we've been through a number of these phases before, as you can see on the slide, as we've shifted kind of civilizational modes, as it were. And we're in another one of these non-linear emergence phases now. All we know is that we can't predict what it's going to look like, but we do know how to put in place the conditions for emergence. And they're quite different conditions, ways of leading and ways of organizing, than a predict and control model when you're certain about the future. Right? So there's a lot of uncertainty in these kind of conditions. And this is how I made sense of it when I was writing Evolutionary Leadership, that you have, when we create solutions, we create them in the context of the problems that we're facing, but those solutions that we create always have in them the seeds of the next set of problems. Right? The solutions we create always have in them the seeds of the next set of problems. Okay? And when our solutions mature, we start to see the new problems emerge. So the Industrial Revolution was a solution to a whole bunch of challenges. right? It moved us forward in great ways, but it had within it the seeds of a lot of the ecological challenges, etc., that we're facing today. And when we start to realize that an old system is breaking down and not working anymore, we enter what the systems thinkers call a chaos point. And that's a moment where we know that the old system's not working, but we don't have the solutions for the new system yet. Right? And remember the fitness thing? So that's when we start to feel the stress, because we know it's not working, but we have no idea what's next. And in those moments, as you see the new blue line emerging, under the radar, people start to innovate and experiment and look for the new systems. In the meantime, the old system is collapsing and creating lots of stress around us. The good news is that this is a normal part of change. All right, so we can all relax and go, oh, that's all right. This has happened before. You know, it will pass. And we need to be conscious then of the role we choose to play in this context. And I love this image from the Bacana Institute, who identified 3 roles to play in these kind of emergence moments. Like, one is you can create the conditions to support the emergence of the new. Create innovation labs, places where people can really prototype and experiment and try to find new ways of doing things. But you can also find ways to help the old system let go and die gracefully. Hospicing the systems. And the reason that's important is because if you can help it let go gracefully, it'll fertilize the soil for the new. If it struggles and fights and resists, it'll do everything it can to sabotage the new. It'll toxify the soil. So the art of hospicing old systems is a very interesting one that I always say. I say there's a market for it. Help old systems die and let go in ways that honor the contribution they've made and help them let go and support the new. And then as the new system emerges, there's a story to tell and a choice to offer people, right? This is the new, that's the old. When you're ready, here's the bridge. That's illuminating the choice. So these are different roles to play in these kind of contexts. So nonlinear change context, requiring different kinds of approaches to change and leadership. And the question is then, okay, what do we pay attention to in these contexts? And this I found one of the most useful frameworks. This comes from Ken Wilber's work, Integral Theory. If you want a starter, he's written lots of books, but probably a good place to start is called A Theory of Everything. And basically, what he did was he mapped out all the different theories he could find, and he said, what's the framework that connects them? So his basic assumption was that everything is true, but only partially true. So everything has a piece of the puzzle, but the question is, how do you fit the puzzle together? And what he came up with here is, look, you've got inner experience that we have, the invisible stuff under the iceberg, right? You've got the outer experience that you can see above the water and the iceberg. You've got that happening at the individual level, and you've got that happening at the collective level. So the interior of the individual is what goes on inside of us, our mindsets, our values that you can't measure or see. What goes on exterior of the individual is our behaviors that you can see and measure, right, and track. Our Western, rational, scientific worldview only really acknowledges the exterior because you can measure it, right, and track it. The messy bit is the interior because it's human. The collective interior is the culture, which we know a lot about in intercultural youth work, right? All the values and the clashes and everything else that goes on under the surface of the iceberg. And the point is, we need to be looking at all 4 of these perspectives. So it's not an either or. If we're looking to understand a situation, we need to understand people's behavior, the systems and structures they're embedded in, the motivation that they have for behaving the way they do, the psychology of it, and the culture that they're embedded in. If you fail to take into account one of those, there's a far lesser chance of your change initiative succeeding. So an organization that rolls out a new IT system, for example, lower right quadrant, systems and structures, and fails to think about people's motivation for using the new IT system, is likely to put millions of dollars, euros into it and not get the result they want because they haven't taken into account the human dimension. So the integral framework kind of helps to it's like, again, a kind of checkbox from, okay, are we paying attention to all these different elements? And I'm just going to go through some examples briefly on the system and structures and then spend a bit of time on culture. So this is the only one on organization and things. As I said before, in these contexts, predict and control works when you know what you're doing. When you can predict what's going to happen, you can control and manage your way forward. But in a non-linear, complex, rapidly changing environment, that approach doesn't work. So you need what we can call dynamic steering or agile governance. And I often compare it to riding a bike through the streets of Amsterdam. Right? If you think that's where I'm going and you just drive in a straight line, you're likely to end up under a tram. If you have a sense of direction, but you're present in each moment and you steer your way around the trams and the cyclists and everything else, you'll get there safely. So it's about how we organize ourselves to take the smallest steps we can to get the data we need to inform the next step, and that's all. Like big plans, 5-year plans that we want to roll out and execute in this kind of change context are likely to just generate more and more stress because after you take the first step, the plan is out of date. Right. So it's moving from a culture of planning, organizations of planning and control, to organizations that are much more organic and agile in their approach. So we don't have much time to go into the organizational side of it. On that, there's a bit more in the Evolutionary Leadership book on that if you're interested. Okay. So, I wanted to delete this one, actually. I'm not going to go... Well, actually, I'll put it up and I'll mention a couple of the points here. I hope we've got the new version. These were kind of just some principles that Don talked about. Don's main work was in South Africa in the transition out of apartheid, where he worked with Mandela and de Klerk to cut across the different ethnic groups within South Africa and facilitate that transition. And these were some of the tips that came out of that. He was like, make sure we focus on the future and what's coming in. Don't get too caught up in the past. And this third one is interesting. Look for the new intelligences that appear around the chaos and within the crucibles. So where are the places that people are innovating? Like where people are feeling the stress and the tension and they're really trying to create new things. Go and look for those. Find the goals that will transcend everybody's priorities and agendas. If you've got an overarching goal that everybody believes in, and they realize that they can't achieve that without each other, then you've got a chance that they're going to collaborate and work together on it, right? The superordinate goal. Any kind of change, particularly more intense, is going to generate tension. So it's not about collapsing tension. Tension itself is just information. Tension is information about a system. It's information. So it's about how you take that information in and work with it constructively. So you want to avoid and contain conflicts that will prevent people from moving forward, but acknowledge that there will be tension and conflict during cycles of change. And how do you work with that constructively? Again, that's something which I think in the youth work world we've done a lot of work on. All right, so you don't need to see and get into the details of this. I'm going to simplify it in a minute. But I just wanted you to see the source material first. So this is, are many familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's often taught, it's basically, until people have got their survival needs met, they won't be able to do the next thing, et cetera, et cetera. So this came out at the same time as Maslow, a guy called Clare Graves. But the difference, he said, is that it doesn't stop at the top. It's not a closed pyramid. It's an open-ended system. Because what happens is we solve problems, we create new problems, and it just keeps going. So we develop new coping mechanisms to deal with new problems. So as we evolve, we actually increase our ability to deal with complexity. Right? Because each new stage transcends and includes the previous stages. Right? So that means you're able to deal with more of reality as we move forward. So just quickly on this, so this is an understanding of Remember I said right at the beginning that fitness is about how we cope with the life conditions around us. Okay? So these value systems that we develop in ourselves are our coping mechanisms. They're the way we cope with the world around us. And you can see the pattern in our collective journey as humanity, and you can see it in our individual journey from the moment we're born. So beige at the bottom is about survival. You know, it's the first Maslow level. It was survival clans when we first emerged, and it's the moment we're born. We just have to survive. What emerges next in the purple system are tribal contexts. So in our collective journey, we went from survival clans into organizing into tribes to create greater safety. At the individual level, that's still our journey. And in these first two stages, as a baby, you still experience yourself as one with everything as the world around you. You can't differentiate between yourself and the mother, for example, in those first year and a half or so. And that's interesting because collectively, when we evolved through survival clans into tribes, we experienced ourselves as one with the world around us. We didn't sit around talking about it, not philosophizing about it, but we felt that we were part of one kind of system around us, one ecosystem, etc. When the red system emerges, that's the first time we develop a sense of self, a sense of separate self. Psychologically, it's the ego. Okay? So it's when the baby becomes, let's say, 2 or 3, and they start for the first time to go me, and no, no, no. Right? It's the first time they develop a sense of self. Me and other. In the collective journey, it was when feudal tribes, feudal empires emerged, farming for the first time emerged. And it's the first time that we started to experience time as linear. Before then, we experienced time as cyclical. So linear time is actually quite a recent phenomenon in our experience. And so because we started to plant for the future, rather than hunt and gather for now, we postponed our desire to eat by planting now, in the sense that we would get something for the future. So that's what happens in red. And then those feudal tribes, like those feudal empires, they all start fighting with each other. And what happens is the top chief, the one who comes out top, decides, let's pull them all together and create a country. Create a nation state. So the blue system is the system that generated our nation states. It created order and structure around the chaos. And it's also the context in which the religions emerged. So all the religions emerged in different cultures, but they emerged in this blue order-driven hierarchical value system. God at the top priest, next priest, peasants. You know, that was the kind of hierarchy. At the individual level, it's as we get into our, let's say, just pre-teens, early teens, this is where we're looking for structure. We're looking for order. We're looking for what's right and what's wrong. We're looking for meaning and purpose. And I'll come back to that and why that's been missing in a lot of parenting today. What came out of the nation states at some point was then this, well, and let me say in blue, we were being told to take things on faith. So the priests were, you believe it because I say it's true. But then we invented the microscope and the telescope. And we started to realize we could discover things ourselves. And that actually, the sun doesn't go around the earth. Actually, the earth goes around the sun. But you'd get burned at the stake for saying it because that wasn't what the priest believed and told you had to believe. So what emerges eventually with enough pressure is the scientific, rational mindset that decides we're going to go out and we're going to analyze and understand this world the best as we can. We're going to release people from these faith traditions and have them be the best that they can. Kind of grow, achieve, earn lots of money if you can, all these things that explore, discover worlds. So this orange system is the foundation of our Western civilization that the Industrial Revolution came into, and it was all about releasing the individual to achieve anything that they could and to go out there and be discoverers and explorers of the world. The whole free market economic system is based on this value system. It's an expression of this value system. The individual, it's the moment that they decide, okay, I need to go out into the world myself and make my way, play the game of society, as it were. Now, what happens after that, in some cases, is that people get tired of this rat race of more and more, of faster and faster, of better and better, and they go, there's more to life than that. And what emerges is what is called the sensitive self. That's the self that realizes, wow, I have an emotional world I need to take care of. Other people are important. It's not just about being the best and having the next biggest yacht or fastest car or whatever it is. I start to care about the world and the environment around me. I develop sensitivity. Now that, of course, is quite common in the youth work. I'd imagine a lot of you recognize the reason that we're in this work is because we think it's not just about money and more and better. It's about people and harmony and all these kind of important things. Inclusion, human rights, everything else comes out of that green value system. And that is where we're kind of at the moment, which I'll come to in a sec. What happens after that is that each of those first 6 value systems believes that finds it hard to acknowledge and find value in the other value systems. So they're battling each other, right? Green thinks orange, a bunch of materialists. Orange thinks blue are a bunch of kind of backward traditionalists. Green thinks blue are a bunch of hierarchical oppressors. And so, you get these battles across the value systems. Yellow, when they did the research, they found that yellow took a quantum leap in its ability to deal with complex problems because it was the first value system that was able to integrate and see the value of all the other value systems, to see that they all had a place, and to realize what we had to do is meet people where they were at in their journey and create the life conditions that support them to express themselves in a healthy way based on where they're at on this journey. So I'm going to come and speak to more of that in a minute. The other ones are kind of hypothetical, really, at the moment. So here it is simplified down. So to give you an example of, for example, why particularly in the Nordic countries, we have found postmodern parenting, which comes out of the green egalitarian system. Green cares about harmony and inclusion and sees everybody as the same and deserving of the same. Beautiful value system. It has an allergy to rules and structure. It doesn't like imposing rules and structure and order. And yet, when kids are growing up, that blue system is absolutely what they need to be able to take the step out into the world, develop the discipline in themselves to be able to play the game in the world, in the market, in society, right? So when a green postmodern parenting removes the blue system, structures, rules, reward and punishment, you do this, these are the implications, but spends the whole time negotiating with the children, then they don't get that structure that they need to be able to move on. And then you see that they'll kind of either drop down, they'll stay in this kind of red system, which is very egocentric, which is all about me and what I need, and has not really got that sense of commitment to a greater whole, which is what blue brings. There's a need for meaning and order and these kind of things. To be able to get in and play the game, as it were, in orange. That's just one example of how we can see these value systems. Now, to take this to a meta level in terms of what's going on in the world today, remember the balloon image I had earlier? I said when a system gets squashed in the middle, it's like a balloon and you get the bulge kind of up and down. Well, the balloon here is kind of horizontal, as it were. And what we're seeing going on in the world today is that what has been the conventional, accepted value systems, which has been the orange entrepreneurial self, and increasingly in our policy elites, the green egalitarian order, the postmodern relativist mindset, those have proven inadequate to dealing with the complexity that we're facing at the moment. And what happened as the elites kind of moved up into these value systems, they forgot to take into account the earlier value systems that a lot of people still felt were important. And a classic example of this is the left, the labor movement, traditionally, that used to have a very strong connection to the working class, who were doing their job, who were following the rules, who were getting a decent wage, etc. Lost contact, which is very much in the kind of blue, red value systems. And by the way, there's no judgment about what's good or bad value system. No value system is better or worse than another. Remember, they're coping mechanisms for the life conditions that we face. What happens is they lost contact with those value systems and created a vacuum in society. So who filled that vacuum? The populists. The populists stepped in and were going, oh, there's a whole bunch of disaffected people here who are not feeling spoken to by the current policy and governance elites. And that blue system is nationalist. That red system, is all about meeting your own needs now. It doesn't care about the bigger whole. It's ethnocentric as a value system, right? It's ethnocentric as a value system. So what we've seen, remember this regression? We're seeing this regression to these earlier value systems as we fail to deal with the complexity that we're facing in the world. So Donald Trump is a classic example of this, that you can see. It's back down to MAGA, make America great again, blue, absolute order. He's probably approaching it from an orange entrepreneurial self, from his business side. Why is it not an integral approach? Well, if he had green, he would not be pulling out of all the environmental agreements and everything else, right? So we're seeing this regression in this very interesting what's going on in the UK right now. Have we got people from the UK here, or are they not allowed to be here with the press? Okay, one. Okay. But many of you have probably heard Nigel Farage and the whole Brexit thing. So Reform, which is the populist party in the UK, basically jumped into this kind of red-blue vacuum and were massively growing in popularity. And they had no resistance because the folks who were kind of up in orange and green were all in there, it's all about global international trade and world peace and everything else. Meanwhile, people were losing their jobs. They were living in shitty homes with damp in the houses. And they were going, but you're not solving any of our problems. And it was all way too abstract for them. So populist comes in, talks their language, brings that energy and meets their needs. So Farage comes in. We're seeing in the UK now one example of, I think, potentially an emergent yellow that is starting to counter that movement and being able to engage those people as well. Does anybody know who that is? Yeah, right. So the Green Party, who have been on the fringes of politics for 30 years, maybe 5% of the vote. This guy, Zach Polanski, shows up, and he talks about eco-populism. Eco-populism. And he starts to take on the populists with that kind of energy. He's like, we're going to tax the billionaires. And by the way, Farage is a billionaire. He says, we're going to redistribute wealth. And he takes them on with their own energy, with that red-blue energy. And all of a sudden, Reform start losing votes. Green Party rises in the polls. Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, all getting squeezed in the middle. They're all dropping. May the 7th is local elections. My prediction is you're going to see the main parties all lose, you're going to see Reform grow, and you're going to see the Greens grow. Because the system has come under stress, and the conventional system has proved inadequate to dealing with the problems, right? Now, the thing is, whenever you have that happen, you have a pre-conventional response, and you have a post-conventional response. The pre-conventional is the kind of populist response. Right, the red-green. Let's go back to the things we know. Just being British, all these kind of the nation state and all of this. We'll protect ourselves. Has anybody actually held Farage account for his promises from Brexit? None of them have been materialized. But like with Trump, they don't care. People don't care. They listen to him and they'll believe whatever he says because these earlier value systems are not rational scientific. Right? They don't have the kind of orange perspective. It's much more emotional. So Trump can say what he wants, and BBC can do all the fact-checking it wants. His following, his background, they don't care. Right? They'll just follow him because of his passion. But he's made some fundamental mistakes, like when he starts to criticize the Pope, then the blue value system Catholics start to get disaffected. All right? So it's very interesting to see. The question then becomes, how do we help the post-conventional emergence happen so that there's a progressive alternative solution to the pre-conventional story that the progressives are bringing? And you can probably see this dynamic in many, many different countries. There's a couple of articles on my blog where I try to describe it as well. So that's just an example of the importance of understanding these codes that underlie people's motivations for what they're doing, and spiral dynamics is a good example of that. I could also say, and certainly I think you might have seen amongst young people, quite a few people going back to some form of religion. They're looking for, what they're looking for is that blue. Right? They're looking for that certainty, that meaning, and that purpose, which is not a bad thing. It's a healthy thing to look for the blue if that can be done in an open and constructive way and not a closed form of religion. But also, a lot of people are searching for this post-conventional story. So let me give you an example of a tension here. Let's imagine that, or it's a horrible thought, but the Christian Crusaders hundreds of years ago, luckily they only had swords and basic cannons. If they had had nuclear weapons, we'd be in a very different world. That is kind of purple, red, bit of blue value system. Those value systems, and this might be controversial, but sit with it, those value systems are the same value systems that the radical fundamentalist clerics of Iran hold. They want to destroy Western civilization in the same way that the Christian Crusaders wanted to destroy the Islamic world, because it didn't follow their belief system. Now, nuclear weapons in the hands of ethnocentric value systems is a very dangerous thing. Now, whether they really have nuclear weapons, whether Trump is doing the right thing, blah, 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 who knows? We know in Iraq the same justification was made and there was never any evidence for nuclear weapons being there. But just to think about when you have world-centric technology that can make a difference globally in the hands of ethnocentric morality, you have a problem. And green, in its beautiful, all equal, all different kind of egalitarianism, we want to include everybody in the story thing, finds it very hard to see that and make that differentiation, because it wants to believe we can all sit around together and sing Kumbaya and solve the problems we're facing. The reality is more challenging than that. It's what Gorbachev called ruthless realism. Ruthless realism. You have to look it all in the eye. So understanding value systems and the deeper motivations is really important if we're going to be able to stitch it all together from the kind of more integral perspective. The timing thing isn't working here, so I've actually no idea how much time I've got. 6 minutes, okay. 6 minutes, okay. All right. So these next 3 slides you can look at later. So this is a bit more just about the orange value system. Oh, there we go, there it is. Oh, now this one says 2.5. I just lost some time. So these 3 slides tell you a bit more about these value systems. But I do want to finish it off. Okay. Actually, I will do that one because it's fun. So just to tell you something, has anybody read Dan Brown's The Secret of Secrets, the new Dan Brown book? One. Okay. So just to say, some of the things that are emerging right now, to give you a peek at new technology, is technologies that can measure the space in between us. So we have biofeedback stuff, but there is technology that's actually being able to show that our intention affects the world around us. That when we have a shared collective experience, we impact the world, based on 28 years of research at Princeton School of Engineering, researching why when pilots get stressed, they affect the instruments on the dashboard of the aircraft. So it's demonstrating some kind of field, you could call it a field of consciousness, or you could, from quantum physics, you could talk about an entangled system that has an effect on the reality around us, that we're not as separate as the materialist worldview would have us think, but there is actually something that, that connects us. And there's a lot of science behind this. Dan Brown describes it all in his new book, The Secret of Secrets, at the beginning of which he says, everything that I write in this book, all the organizations I mentioned and the research I describe is real. But he packs it, of course, in a thriller container. So these are some of the things that are going to radically change how we see ourselves. Like if all of a sudden my inner reality can affect the world around us, then what does that mean for who we are, how we show up, etc.? Oh, it's gone blank. Did I press something there? Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's wrap up with these then. So what do we do? How do we show up then as leaders in this kind of context where we're trying to get into this post-conventional, but where the language hasn't been created yet, right? Where we really are inventing something, there's something new emerging. So it's easy to fall back to the pre-conventional and tell the old stories. It's hard to lean into the future, which is uncertain, and to try to presence whatever it is that's trying to emerge. So obviously in these kind of contexts, we need a lot of adaptivity. We need to be able to, on the one hand, hold our center, and on the other hand, be able to adapt quickly to what's coming at us. Any martial arts practice will give you a lot of good training for that. It's all about center line and then the agility around that. Being able to sit in the chaos and not get caught up in it. Sit in like the eye of the storm. Let the stuff go that needs to be let go and pay attention to what's coming in. Letting go of what no longer works, often one of the hardest things to do. If it doesn't work, let it go. Because until you let something go, there's no space for something new to come in. Acknowledging that you don't know when you don't know. So when a leader thinks they know the solution, the people who their team, they'll sniff that they're lying. They don't really know. That they've just been trained and they're being paid to know. So we pretend to know. But everybody knows you don't really know. So they lose trust and faith in you. The moment that you say, actually, I don't really have a solution to this. What happens? People lean in. They start to feel engaged. They start to feel invited to contribute to it. So not knowing is a really important quality. It's a beautiful quote from Krishnamurti. One is not afraid of the unknown, but of losing the known. The known is memory, and to that memory the mind clings. In that not knowing, that doesn't mean you're not doing anything. It means what you're doing is you're starting to sense the patterns that are emerging for the new. And that's not a rational mind activity. That's a more intuitive mind activity. So it's more of a sensing than a knowing. So we need to use different intelligences as we start to sense what it is that's actually trying to emerge. If it's complex, it's probably not the answer. It's when you get an insight that feels so simple, you're kind of, oh, of course, that's what it is. Then you know you're onto something. The complexity of a problem determines the amount of diversity you need to solve it. The more complex the problem, the more diversity you need. Of course, you need to manage that diversity constructively, but that's something we're pretty good at in this world, okay? So that means when you've got a complex problem, you need to seek out diverse perspectives, ones that are outside of your bubble, that don't fit the way you're seeing things. And then you need to give it attention. So if something strange comes across your path, but you're locked in your email inbox or your to-do list, and you don't pay attention to it, it'll just go on by. So as the new things pop in, it's a discipline to be able to go, oh, okay, well, wonder what that is, and give it some attention, particularly young people, right, who are going to come through with new thinking. If it doesn't fit your old way of thinking and you dismiss it, then you may have lost the opportunity to really bring something in that's emerging in the new. So paying attention to some of the new signs. Experimenting. So one thing about emergence, as I say, is you can't know what the future will hold. So you have to just experiment and play. Test things out. Get iteration, get the feedback, work out what you're going to do next. I think we'll just skip the video bit for now, given time, okay? But might show it later if you want to see it. Don't read that. Okay. And so the rapid learning goes hand in hand with the experimentation, right? If we're going to experiment and take risks, we need to be disciplined about learning from what it is we're doing. Yeah, it goes hand in hand, which again is something through experiential learning and all the stuff we do in youth work we're good at. So we have a lot of possibilities here to contribute. And by the way, I found a lot of this when I took all this into the business world. I found a lot of what I've been doing in youth work was immensely valuable and new to people in that world. In these kind of contexts, you can't push the river. You can't force people into the new. It has to be an invitation, and the people who are ready will step in. Anybody know who this is? Dr. Dolittle. Yeah. And this animal is called a push-me-pull-you. I don't know if he's like out of favor and being cancelled or something, because I don't see him on the bookshelves anymore. But anyway, so it's not a pushing or a pull, it's an invitation. And it'll be an adoption curve. In marketing, they talk about an adoption curve. You know, you have innovators, early adopters. You want those people to join early on, the ones who are ready, and the others will follow later. So we don't try to convince the whole world, but we prototype, test, invite people to join doing things, to join what we're doing, and the people who are ready will join. Last but certainly not the least, these conditions create a lot of stress. Burnt out change agent or youth worker is no good to anybody. So it's not a luxury to look after ourselves. That's what I'm saying in this context, right? We have to pay attention to our own well-being, our own mental well-being, our physical well-being, whether it's a mindfulness practice you have, whether it's walks in nature, whether it's going down the gym or doing sport, whatever it is, make sure we look after ourselves because they're crazy times and we need to stay grounded. Otherwise, we're no good to anybody. Oh, yeah. So there's two elements to this, the kind of masculine and a feminine element to this. In classic mindfulness practice, you're taught non-attachment, right? Here it all is. Okay, I'm not getting caught up in it all. Just notice it all. If you take that too far, it becomes detachment, and you become cold and insensitive. So you have to balance that with the archetypical feminine of feeling, of compassion. So in the Buddhist teachings, it's always the equanimity, the non-attachment, hand in hand with the compassion. If you get lost in the feeling, you lose your clarity. Right? So it's a dance, and it's never fixed. It's always a dance between how we can see clearly, not get caught up in it, but stay connected through our hearts to what's going on, because that's the fuel for the fire of what it is we want to do. Okay, skip this one. All right, finish with this. A little poem that my brother wrote about the future. Feeling strange. I fear not this feeling strange. It is the future being born, taking new form, the freshness of air after the storm. A slow rising, sense of arriving, letting go of striving to get it all done, stopping now to enjoy the sun, feeling it has begun when I slow, feel the speed trees grow, the way the rivers flow. There is an easier way that feels like play, molds me like clay into what I am to become. Bring on the rising of the sun over the dark mountain range. I fear not this feeling strange. It's the future being born, taking new form, the freshness of air after the storm. The watered ground, the sound of my heart exploding, of the birds chirping. I want to ride the roads of this land like Dick Turpin, whooping and hollering into the unknown of tomorrow, into nameless joy and sorrow, and deeper learning, sitting in the churning of our future, unfolding all around on watered ground. I fear not this feeling strange. It's the future being born, taking new form, the freshness of air after the storm.
Hey, thanks, Peter. I think it was. I'm wondering to find a proper word. Probably it's. It was a lot to process. I could imagine. I think looking at there, but I hope this sense of destabilization is also good. No, so moments to stretch the minds. So we give Peter a 10 minutes break. But will you go a little bit next to your neighbors, and let's say next 10 minutes. We ask you to chat with your neighbors a little bit. Okay, so what does it all mean for us, for our work? What I find inspiring here, and perhaps if you have a question to Peter, we will have another 10 minutes after for a few questions for Peter. You can have a break and a sip of water. So turn to your neighbors and process a bit what you just heard. So enjoy. Thanks. Great. Thanks a lot. The good news is that Peter stays with us the whole day. So if you would be wondering, so what did you mean with the slide 24? Or what was this orange thing and not the beige? He will be here, so actually use the opportunity to ask him questions like that. I'm sure there was a lot of mind stretching inside, and it was not the intention of this intervention that you have to understand everything in the first go, but take what needs, what works for you, what works for your context, and also particularly after this session, when you go to the deep dive groups, let's see, okay, oh, wow, what does this mean actually what Peter spoke related to this topic that we're exploring together there. But maybe, Peter, you want to say something before we go to questions?
Yeah, just to say, could you put the slide back up with the books on? So I had a pile of books that I brought with me. Most of them have disappeared, which is a good sign, really. But I do have to sell them because they cost something to produce. So if you'd like one, come and see me. I've got a QR code you can scan to buy them. Just so you know, of course, they are online anyway. But so Evolutionary Leadership has a lot more on the spiral dynamics and stuff in it for leadership and organization. Leading from the field is more about, if you can accept there's a field of consciousness, what does that mean for leading organizations and initiatives? Why Work is a little revolutionary book about how we need to change the global and local economies to make work meaningful for people and planet. Includes stuff from Ivan Illich and those kind of people. Evolution is a very deep dive into a philosophy of interconnectedness, was my PhD thesis. And this book is being printed at the moment in Brazil, Whole Performers, which is much more for the business world. And it's focused on that move from the orange high performer to the yellow whole performer that integrates the sensitive self and the human intelligences, basically, in the system. So there will be an ebook on Amazon, hopefully in a week or so. So yeah, if you can't get them now, you can get them somewhere else. If you do want them now, please come and see me.
Yes, thanks a lot. We have one question from the online audience. It's just coming here on screen. I don't see it at the moment, but can we show this question? Yes. Oh, that's from Susie. She said, I'm curious about these chaos points in systems, especially how policy influence that. From where are policies rooted, old systems or new system?
Yeah, well, there's people from the Netherlands here. So some of you might know Herman Wijfels. He was like, the Dutch called him the best prime minister they never had. And he wrote the foreword to the first Evolutionary Leadership book. And he used to say, politics always follows. Civil society and business lead. And that's why he never went into politics, why he never became prime minister. He was CEO of Rabobank. And so I think basically the answer to this question is the policies tend to be the last thing to change. So we have to kind of demonstrate it through practice and good examples of what we're doing before the policymakers will actually make that shift. So the bureaucracies of government and policy tend to come out of the old system, and it takes a while for them to shift. So that's why, in youth work we have opportunities to prototype, and in business contexts as well, if they can get beyond the pure profit motive.
Yeah. So I guess not waiting for policies to
don't wait for the policies.
Yes, thanks a lot. So let's see what the questions are there in the room. Anita is there with the mic, so Frigel.
Hiya, Peter.
Oh, wow.
Okay, sorry. I was interested that one of the first things you mentioned was around the questionnaire with the CEOs that IBM does. And I think you mentioned there was like 1,000 or something like this. And my thought was instantly that wasn't that the precursor to a lot of the chaos that we now have? And it's interesting that your IBM asked the people who have created the chaos, or many of them, about what is the hypercomplex word. They created a phrase for it, So I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that. It's like asking the people with the nuclear, missiles, should we use these,
Well,
thanks.
Yeah, they're the ones picking up the early signals, because in the market, if you don't adjust and aren't agile, your feedback's instant, right? In government, that takes a little while. It's a lot slower. So they're immediately feeling what is happening in the world and what's needed for them and their organization to have to navigate it. And ultimately, and this is the thing, we can kind of criticize the old system, but until we come up with a better alternative, someone's got to keep the lights on. Mm-hmm. Right? And I can tell you, a lot of these leaders, they know the old system's not working, but they don't have the bandwidth to find space for the new. Mm-hmm. So it's in the crucibles of innovation, in the spaces around the current mainstream, that the new systems need to emerge. And so that's our responsibility. As Buckminster Fuller said, to build the new systems that make the old ones obsolete. Right? But in the meantime, things still have to run. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, some people might be doing it explicitly for their own gain, but I also know there's a lot of people who are just, please, will somebody come up with a better alternative?
Mm-hmm. So the chaos is not a vacuum, so it's a little bit of the old, a little bit of the new emerging, but yeah.
It goes hand, somebody, Paul Ray it was, who wrote the Cultural Creators book, said things are getting better and better, worse and worse, faster and faster. And I thought that was a great summary. Break down, break through, always go hand in hand.
Thank you. Any more questions there? Yeah, on this side. Anita, if you can, thanks.
My question is about the chaos phase. How can we, as leaders from civil society, prevent for them to destroy everything? Because I feel like with all this anger, hate, and war, so much is destroyed, and sometimes it's too much destroyed. Yeah. And so what can we do to, prevent the worst?
Yeah, well, you remember the Berkana slide that had create the conditions for emergence? So it's how we put in place the conditions that enable people to develop the alternatives, basically the new ways of doing things. So focus on that, the kind of post-conventional emergence, and there is going to be, we probably haven't seen the worst of it, to be honest, yet, as this system collapses. But what we need to do is be building the alternative so that as it collapses, there's something new that can carry it. So it's how we create, like innovation was a theme, right? Here, how we create those hubs of innovation where people, anyone here familiar with Theory U? Like Otto Scharmer and Presencing Institute and all of that. Anyway, it's also in the Evolutionary Leadership book, but there is a book called Presence as well, where they describe how it's based on how organizations like radically reinvented themselves. And these are processes that enable us to let go of the old systems, create space, really tune into what's emerging from the future, and start to prototype and experiment with it. And that's what we need to do. All right? Yes, there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering in the meantime, and we mustn't disconnect ourselves from it. But we need to work on building the new. As Don Beck had this beautiful quote, he said, no more prizes for predicting the rain, only prizes for building the arcs.
Interestingly, in the good news for our field here, actually yesterday we delivered Companion, the cards. Actually, we came out of learning here in the academy. And actually a lot of those questions in the Companion asking exactly these kind of questions. Like what's old that is not working anymore, what's new that is coming, but actually also how to support innovation in the field, also emergence there. Any other question? More. Yes, Dermot.
How's it going? Yeah, I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here, like historically, the responsibility for the development of children and young people came from the adults in their lives, and the ecosystem of influence was usually there was proximity there, it was the person in your life, and now we know there's lots of influence, there's the information that's available to young people about how they see the world, how they understand the world, how they interpret it. Doesn't require an adult in proximity, and yet we have proximity. And one of the things I'm wondering is there a pull or a tension around whether because from what you talk about, there's a lot of truth-telling required in the sensing, and how do we manage the urge to protect young people or to do the truth-telling? And is there a tension in that about how things are, where we are in a stage of regression or otherwise, and how we support them to see what's there so that they can navigate into a better future, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're getting bombarded by complexity that we never got bombarded with when we were kids. Like it was curated, as it were. For us, it's not curated anymore. Which means, if you think about life conditions, they're getting exposed to a high complexity of life conditions, and that's forcing them to try to find ways to cope with it. And that can lead to the regression and the breakdown, but it can also lead to a huge amount of innovation and new and creative thinking, because that's what we're able to do as humans. We have done it 6 times before. We're able to sit with that complexity and allow it to work us, allow it to create new insights, new thoughts. So on the one hand, I think sense making is really important, like helping people make sense of what's going on. Like, okay, this is a normal part of change. It's not always going to be pleasant, but you're going to get this regression and you're going to get this breakthrough. You're going to get the breakdown, you're going to get the breakthrough at the same point. So how we give them the tools, first of all, like the last set of principles, to be able to manage themselves during that, to be able to not get completely kind of stressed out by it all, on the one hand. But on the other hand, to recognize that the complexity that they're being faced with, these are the conditions that would enable them to come up with solutions to deal with that complexity. And so how we create these kind of spaces that allow them to be with it and not get fearful of it or worried by it, but to say, okay, if this is the reality, the ruthless realism that Gorbachev talked about, facing it, look it in the eye, and then go, well, if this is true, what then? If you were able to, come up with new ways of doing things, whatever, what would you do? And to be able to actually make it explicit and sit with it and face it in itself is very empowering, right? Because then they're kind of, okay, breathe. This is true. We can sit with it. There is going to be pain. There's going to be breakdown, but there's also something new coming, and how we can put our attention on that, I think will give them some hope. Some of was it last year that survey came out that was 52% of young people or something were feeling hopeless about the future or something. It was a really depressing statistic. But just so that if they can just have a story that can say, we're in a moment of change, this is normal, and then stuff is coming, and you can play a part in building that future, then I think there's more chance that they'll see things in a slightly more positive or optimistic way than maybe the current media is feeding them. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your questions. Thanks a lot, Peter. It was a big applause for your energy and sharing. Yeah, I think it equipped us with not just concepts and theories and experiences, but also maybe with some ideas that we can already practice in this European Academy on Youth Work, especially in our deep dive sessions, wondering, okay, maybe what's coming to the end and what's new is emerging. Also, youth work itself is in transition, change, and maybe also wondering in what kind of change maybe European youth work is at the moment. So we will collectively, exactly what you said a few minutes ago, we will do sense making tomorrow afternoon and wondering, so what does it all mean for future of youth work? But where do we go next? We bring floor back to Anita. Woohoo.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. It was a lot of food for thought. We're going to have soon a coffee break. I just want to give you instructions of how to follow through the program afterwards. So a few announcements. The deep dive sessions will start right after the coffee break.